It was an ordinary day in the Capitol building, or so I thought. The familiar buzz of political maneuvering, the clacking of shoes on marble floors, and the chatter of aides discussing the latest talking points. But today was going to be different. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene stood at the podium, doing what she does best, stirring up chaos. She was ranting about everything from election fraud to the so-called deep state, a conspiracy theory she'd peddled for months. The room was tense, the air thick with anticipation, but little did she know, someone was about to make her eat her words. Jasmine Crockett, the rising star from Texas, had been watching. With a quiet confidence, she sat at the back of the room, listening to Greene spew her usual nonsense. But today was the day. Crockett had had enough. The lies, the distortions, it all had to stop. As Greene continued her tirade, Crockett stood up, a steely look in her eyes. She wasn't waiting for the next break in the conversation, no, this was her moment. "Excuse me, Representative Greene," Crockett's voice rang out, calm but unwavering, cutting through the chaos of Greene's speech. "You've had the floor for long enough, but it's time someone here pointed out the glaring lies you're spreading." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Crockett, who had already begun walking toward the front of the chamber. Representative Greene's face twisted into an annoyed frown. This wasn't how she saw the day going. Jasmine Crockett stood tall, her gaze fixed on Greene as she made her way to the front. The chamber had gone eerily quiet, all attention on the impending confrontation. Greene, ever the provocateur, stood there, her posture rigid, trying to maintain her composure. But there was a crack in her confidence, something Crockett could see. "Let's address the facts, shall we?" Crockett continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You've been pushing conspiracy theories about voter fraud for months, despite every court ruling against it, every investigation debunking it. Yet, here you are again, parroting the same falsehoods. It's not just irresponsible, it's dangerous." The audience seemed to lean in, some whispering, others nodding in agreement. Greene's face flushed red, but she quickly attempted to brush off the criticism. "You're out of line, Crockett. This is what's wrong with this country. You all want to silence the truth," Greene spat, her words sharp like daggers. But Crockett wasn't backing down. She raised a hand, signaling to the room that she was not finished. "The truth, Representative Greene, is that you've lost your credibility," Crockett said with unwavering precision. "And today, you're going to face the consequences of your lies." Greene opened her mouth to retort, but Crockett was already ready with the next blow. "You've wasted taxpayers' money on investigations that lead nowhere. You've used your platform to incite division, to pit Americans against one another for your own gain. But I'm here today to tell you that this ends now. It's time for the truth to be heard." The tension in the room had reached a fever pitch. Everyone was watching, Democrats, Republicans, staffers, even the media cameras caught the moment as it unfolded live. Greene's face had gone pale, her confidence slipping away like sand through her fingers. It was clear that this wasn't the response she had expected. Crockett didn't miss a beat, stepping closer to Greene, her voice calm but firm. "You want to talk about facts, Representative Greene? Let's talk about the fact that your party has continually failed to bring real solutions to the table. You've spent years sowing distrust, tearing apart the very fabric of this nation with baseless accusations and dangerous rhetoric." Greene's eyes widened, her usual defiance faltering for just a moment. She shot a quick, almost panicked glance at her colleagues, but there was no one to back her up. Crockett had cornered her. "You sit here, spewing lies, and then you call it patriotism? You want to talk about loyalty to this country?" Crockett pressed, her voice rising now, filled with conviction. "It's time we acknowledge that the true patriots are the ones fighting for truth, for justice, and for a future that isn't built on division and deceit." The silence was deafening. Greene's lips trembled, but her words came out in a rushed, defensive burst. "You don't know what you're talking about. I'm fighting for this country, you're fighting for nothing but your own self-interest, Representative Greene," Crockett interrupted, her tone like a whip crack. And you're not fooling anyone. Not anymore. The room erupted into murmurs of approval. Some members even gave Crockett a subtle nod or clap, but Greene's supporters sat still, glaring at her from across the chamber. The damage had been done. Greene's face contorted with frustration. She was losing this battle, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She opened her mouth to retort, but Crockett wasn't finished. "You've embarrassed yourself," Crockett said, the final words coming out slow and deliberate. "And you've embarrassed this chamber." The atmosphere in the chamber was electric. For a moment, it felt as though the weight of every word Crockett had said was hanging in the air. Greene's eyes flicked from side to side, and she took a sharp breath, trying to regain her composure. But the damage was done, her facade had cracked, and the Congress she had tried to dominate for so long was no longer buying into her theatrics. Greene shifted on her feet, clearly searching for a response that would win back the crowd, but nothing came. The once boisterous figure who had fed off chaos and division was now standing there in the face of unshakable truth. Her mouth opened, but only silence followed. She knew it was over. Crockett, sensing her victory, didn't back down. She could feel the power in the room as she continued, her voice now a calm thunder, cutting through the tension. "You're not the victim here, Representative Greene. You've had your chance to lead, and all you've done is divide. You've used lies to manipulate people's fears, and now the truth is finally catching up to you." The room erupted in a wave of murmurs and low applause. The audience, the members of Congress, everyone could see it now. The woman who had once wielded her narrative as a weapon was now exposed, stripped of her power to deceive. Greene's face twisted in anger, but it wasn't enough to hide the humiliation. She tried to fire back, but it came out as nothing more than a weak, desperate attempt to salvage her reputation. "Don't let her fool you," Greene shouted, her voice rising, but there was no authority behind it. "This is a set-up." But Crockett wasn't finished. With a pointed finger, she addressed the entire chamber, her voice sharp, commanding. "This is not a set-up, Representative Greene. This is accountability." A wave of energy rippled through the room as members exchanged looks, some nodding in agreement, others watching with wide eyes. They had witnessed the unraveling of a political figure who had built her career on controversy and lies. Greene, visibly shaken, clenched her fists. She had no comeback. The truth had become an undeniable force, and it was too late to stop it. The chamber was no longer just a room full of politicians. It had become a battleground for truth. Jasmine Crockett stood tall, unwavering, while Marjorie Taylor Greene, once a symbol of defiance, shrank under the weight of her own lies. For a long moment, Greene stood frozen, her face a mask of frustration and disbelief. She had no more arguments, no more conspiracies to cling to. It was as if the floor had been pulled out from under her, and she was left scrambling for something, anything, to regain control. But the room was no longer on her side. The Republicans who had once rallied behind her in the hope of gaining power through division were now quiet. The Democrats, who had long fought against her, were watching with a mix of disbelief and satisfaction. Greene had become a political pariah, and Crockett had become the unexpected force to put an end to it. Crockett didn't let up. "You've spent years feeding into the worst instincts of this country, Representative Greene. You've spread lies that have hurt people. You've used your platform to stir hatred, to manipulate fear. And for what? To prop up a narrative of us versus them? To sell a vision of division that has torn this country apart?" Greene clenched her jaw, her chest rising and falling with anger. She knew she couldn't fight back with words anymore. Every lie she'd told, every conspiracy theory she'd espoused, had been dismantled in front of the entire world. Crockett, sensing the final blow, turned her back to Greene, addressing the chamber as a whole. "This isn't just about one person. This is about accountability in our government. It's about holding every one of us to a higher standard. The truth matters. And today, the truth has won." The chamber exploded into applause. Some members stood, clapping, while others exchanged looks, acknowledging what had just taken place. Greene stood there, stunned, her lips trembling, but there was no fight left in her. The humiliation was complete. Greene made a feeble attempt to speak, but her voice was drowned out by the rising tide of voices in the room. Her eyes darted around as if searching for an ally, but she was alone. The truth had prevailed, and she had nowhere to hide. As the applause continued, Crockett made her way back to her seat, her head held high. She had just changed the course of history, and in that moment, she became a symbol of what real leadership looked like. A leader who fought not for personal gain or division, but for the truth. As the applause slowly died down, a heavy silence took over the chamber. The echo of Crockett's words lingered in the air, their impact undeniable. Representative Greene stood at the podium, her face flushed with anger, but there was nothing she could do. Her voice was drowned out by the collective will of the room, the truth hanging over her like a shadow that refused to be shaken off. For a moment, it seemed as if time had stopped. Greene's eyes darted nervously, her hands trembling at her sides. She knew she had just lost more than a battle in Congress, she had lost the narrative she had built her entire career on. Crockett, ever composed, took a seat. She didn't need to say anything more, the moment had spoken for itself. Her colleagues, many of whom had been silent spectators up until now, were no longer shy in expressing their support for her. Some gave her a quiet nod of approval, others exchanged words of encouragement. It was clear, the tide had shifted. Greene, however, was not ready to accept defeat. With a sharp intake of breath, she finally managed to speak. "You may have won today, but don't think this is over," she said, her voice tight with fury. "You're all part of the same machine, pushing the same agenda. You think this makes you a hero? It's a farce." But Crockett's response was cool, almost dismissive. "It's not about heroism, Representative Greene. It's about integrity. Something you've clearly lost." The response was simple, yet it cut deep. Greene faltered, her face pale as the weight of Crockett's words sank in. She had nothing more to say, no more accusations to level. Her entire political persona had just been dismantled in front of a live audience, and she was powerless to stop it. The speaker called for a break, and members began to leave the chamber, but the fallout from the moment was far from over. News outlets would be buzzing about this for days, maybe weeks. Social media would explode with clips of the exchange. Greene's reputation had taken a massive hit, and Crockett, the freshman representative, had become the new face of accountability. As Greene stormed out of the room, her head held low, Crockett remained seated, taking a deep breath. She knew this wasn't the end of her battle, this was just the beginning. But in that moment, she had proven that truth, integrity, and courage could still stand tall in the face of the most toxic of lies. The day after the explosive confrontation, the political world was buzzing. News outlets across the country had picked up the moment, turning it into a full-fledged media frenzy. Greene's camp scrambled to control the damage, releasing a series of statements attempting to shift blame onto Crockett, accusing her of being disrespectful and trying to silence dissent. But nothing could overshadow the raw footage of Greene, rattled and cornered, struggling to hold her ground. Jasmine Crockett, however, seemed almost untouched by the frenzy. She'd returned to her office, the weight of the moment sinking in but never slowing her down. It was a victory, yes, but not one she was going to rest on. For Crockett, this was just the beginning of a much larger fight. As she scrolled through the countless social media posts, interviews, and commentary pieces about the showdown, one thing became clear: people were paying attention. They were seeing what it looked like when a representative stood up to lies, when someone from the new guard of politics called out the destructive narratives of the past. That night, Crockett went on a primetime news show, and the host wasted no time diving into the aftermath. Congresswoman Crockett, the whole nation saw what happened yesterday. Marjorie Taylor Greene was exposed for her baseless conspiracy theories and outright lies. "How do you feel, looking back on it. Crockett leaned in, a confident smile crossing her face. "I feel proud. Proud to stand up for what's right. But more than that, I feel a responsibility. The people of this country deserve the truth, and if we're going to fix what's broken, we need to stop allowing lies to control the narrative." The host nodded. "But Representative Greene has already called you out, accusing you of being part of a liberal agenda to shut her down. What's your response?" Crockett's smile never wavered. "My response is simple: if exposing the truth is part of an agenda, then I'm guilty as charged. This isn't about ideology. This is about accountability. I'm not here to tear people down, I'm here to raise the standard. The American people deserve better than the lies they've been fed for far too long." Across the country, Americans were taking notice. Greene's support, once strong in certain corners of the political landscape, was now starting to fracture. The faces of her most loyal followers were turning uncertain. The battle wasn't over, but the tide was slowly shifting. Meanwhile, in the halls of Congress, whispers of respect for Crockett's fearless stand were growing louder. Even those who disagreed with her politics couldn't deny her conviction and courage. She had stood up to the powerful, and she had done it without flinching. For Greene, the days ahead were bleak. Her lies were no longer a shield, they were a heavy burden. And Crockett? She had just begun to carve her name into the history books. Weeks passed, and the fallout from that fateful day in Congress reverberated throughout the nation. Marjorie Taylor Greene's once formidable position had been seriously undermined. The media circus surrounding her continued, but the public was no longer as easily swayed by her fiery rhetoric. The truth had been laid bare, and people were starting to see her for what she truly was, a politician willing to sacrifice integrity for the sake of spectacle. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, found herself thrust into the political spotlight. Her bold stand against Greene had made her a hero to many, a voice of reason in a time when chaos often reigned. She was invited to more shows, her social media following skyrocketed, and her message of accountability and truth resonated deeply with a country yearning for a change. In Congress, Crockett continued her work, focused and unshaken. She wasn't here for personal glory, she was here to make real change. But the sting of that victory over Greene wasn't lost on her. She knew that to truly alter the political landscape, it would take more than one speech, it would take a movement. But Greene? She couldn't escape the humiliation. Her supporters grew fewer, her attacks more desperate. She tried to regain her footing by launching a new set of baseless claims, attempting to rally her base with conspiracy theories once more. Yet, the damage had already been done. Her words carried no weight. She had become a cautionary tale for those who relied on deception as a tool for power. In a closed-door meeting, a group of Greene's allies discussed their next steps. They could see that the writing was on the wall, her time at the center of the political stage was dwindling. A new, younger, more dynamic voice had taken center stage, and it wasn't Greene. As for Crockett, her rise in politics seemed inevitable. A few months after her victory in the chamber, she was elected to a leadership position within her party. Her reputation for integrity, her courage in the face of adversity, and her unwavering belief in truth had endeared her to the public and to her colleagues. At the end of the day, the events in Congress that had played out between Greene and Crockett were about much more than just one confrontation. It was a turning point. A moment when the truth broke through the noise of divisiveness and exposed the lies that had held power for far too long. Jasmine Crockett had not only humiliated Greene in Congress, she had set a new precedent for leadership, one where truth and accountability were no longer optional, they were the foundation of a brighter future for the country. And Greene, once a figurehead of chaos, would fade into the background, remembered not for her power, but for the moment when the truth finally caught up with her.